So I was just answering a tweet from Michael Brennan, so I thought that was interesting. You know what, very enjoyable afternoon. I got a chance to sit in on a couple of sessions. A couple of things that sort of dawned on me really quickly. I sat down on my first session and the first thing they said was, okay, to make sure we respect the speakers, please shut off your phones. And I thought to myself, how am I going to retweet what I just heard and then send it off to other people, and then it becomes exponential? So I had a quick chat with Diana, and we thought about, you know what, some of it is generational. It is looked at as a lack of respect. Sometimes if you're looking at your phone, I take everything with my phone. So I take my notes with my phone, I send social media, I send messages, and so on. So it just dawned on me quickly because we talked about networking, and that part of it is something that's exponential in my mind, and from some of the conferences that I've seen in marketing and public relations, it's extremely important. So just take the plenary session that we had, with the numbers that we had in the room, my first plenary session, we had over, I think it's 50 or 60 retweets for 30 minutes. And that's exponential in terms of the views out there, with people chatting about things and looking at it and discussing it and coming up with ideas and so on. So that was just the first thing that popped up in my mind. I was like, oh, okay, no problem. So I put my phone away, but I didn't tweet about that session. And I didn't send anything on LinkedIn, or I didn't send anything on Facebook, which to me is a loss for that session. Now I went into the next one, strength training, and that was a fiery session, fiery topic right off the bat. Me being an endurance athlete doing Ironman, I completely agree with the fact that if you're an endurance athlete, you should do strength training as well, and vice versa. If you're strength training, you should do some aerobics or activity, as Scotty put it. But one thing that I wonder about, and I'm putting it out to you guys, is if you start singling out specific things out of your profession. So if I take education, one of the things that they single out, and if I ask you, you are going to say the same thing, is literacy and numeracy. So if we talk about literacy and numeracy, those are the numbers that pop up in the press, those are the numbers that pop up on the internet and so on, and those are oftentimes the only things that our politicians will look at to evaluate education. And that's a loaded gun, because education is not just about literacy and numeracy. There's a lot of other things that are part of education, the scaffolding for, and in terms of the holistic health of a child, you're looking at, all right, mental fitness, you're looking at physical activity, you're looking at the sciences, you're looking at social studies, so on and so forth. So if we're just looking at, and if you look at mental fitness, can they set a goal and achieve it? You know, those are all things that people don't look at when they look at education. They think we're glorified babysitters most of the time, and they only look at literacy and numeracy scores to see if we do our job or not. And that talk with Scotty sort of made me think about that. Because we were talking about strength training and aerobic training, and which one was better, versus what kind of approach do we need to take to really have the healthiest possible aging community at this point. So you know, there wasn't any mention really about flexibility, about nutrition, about mental fitness, so achieving your goals, so on and so forth. But that holistic approach to me makes sense, and I warn you to make sure that you don't single out things that all of a sudden it becomes your profession's fighting internally, instead of going towards the same vision, which is to keep people active and to make sure that they have a healthy life throughout their life. So I thought that was interesting. Those were two things that sort of popped up on top of it. My background before I became an educator was in sales. I did sales and marketing for PepsiCo for years, which ethically is probably not the right thing to do before I became an educator. But they do have Gatorade, they have Quaker, and a lot of products that are healthy as long as you take it within the context that it should be taken. So that being said, I've been trained in what's called win-win. So it was their way of saying, okay, well, us as a company and you as the customer, we need to have a win-win relationship. And the conversation in one of the talks that I went up to was donor relations, and how do you access donors, and how do you access sponsors for different ideas that you have in physiotherapy. And it was interesting to me because that concept in business world is out there already. Finding a win-win solution is basically listening to each other and then finding what's going to be a win for you, what's going to be a win for me, and let's put it together and let's go together in that line of thought. So when it comes to donors, my advice to you when you're networking, if it's donors, is ask their advice. Write out an email and ask their advice. What do you think about this project? And oftentimes they'll give you 10 minutes and they'll suggest somebody else to go see. Oftentimes with a letter of recommendation or a quick email, hey, you should chat with this person, which is the golden handshake in that situation when it comes to networking. And finding that win-win solution, oftentimes when you reach out to these people, what you will do is, can I have this? Well, they get asked thousands and thousands of times over a month. And they're experts in their fields as well. So they would like to get asked their advice oftentimes. So my suggestion for donor relations would be to do that first. Not to go out and ask money, would be to go ask further advice and then finding a win-win solution from there. So I thought that was really interesting in terms of some of the questions. And the question that Michael Brennan asked on Twitter was, where do I think that, if I remember correctly, was where do I think kids start to not want to become physically active? The research shows that it's usually during the puberty years. And the reason why is girls get self-conscious about a lot of things during middle school and high school, boys the same thing. And there tends to be a disconnect there, mostly because middle school, when we do, the old way of doing physical education was to teach sports. That's good for about 15%, maybe 20%. Of the actual school population. So we're starting to take a look at doing other things. So we're now doing yoga as a physical activity. We started dance classes. And I can tell you right off the bat, when I go in front of a dance class and show my dance moves, pretty much everybody participates after that because I just made a fool of myself in front of 30 kids. So it's to pick activities that they're going to be excited about. And to reach out. Skateboarding is one of the activities that they like to do. But because of insurance issues, it's something that it's not necessarily done often. And that brings me to a question about paperwork. The first session that I went to see after mine was they discussed about paperwork and how paperwork was, basically evil. And I think we all have that problem, that paperwork sort of gets in our way. So finding a solution to that, I think, is really important, and it's the same thing in the education field. I'm going to open it up now to any sort of discussions, and finally we're going to find out what catch the box means. I'm a bit scared about this. There we go.
Hi. This is like the coolest mic ever, and I'm going to throw it at people, and you're going to ask Armand a question.
As she's throwing the mic, we do that in class, and that's physical literacy right there.
Do you have any other ideas of getting an entire school population to be active at one time?
Yes, I do. Well, there's lots of different things. If you look at different models from across the world, in Asia particularly, they have in the morning, they have Tai Chi for the whole school or yoga for the whole school. That's one way to go about it and not make involuntary. So I see that as an option. In my mind, I see an active school being a cross-curricular in every subject. So if you are doing math, like I said, there'd be physical literacy included in that. So let's talk about, you're doing perimeter. What about going outside and giving them different ways to go around the perimeter and seeing which one is the quickest, which one takes the most steps. So maybe you do the perimeter of this room and you got to walk it in as a crab, so at 4 legs. Maybe the other time you skip it. Maybe the other time you need to walk it, and the other time you can run it. So, and then the kids can actually analyze that and see which one went the fastest, which one was the most efficient, and so on and so forth. So I see physical activity as involved in every subject. Music, the marching band, it's pretty simple. You're walking, you're playing music. Art can become quite interesting, but there are ways to incorporate it. And it's physiotherapists getting involved with teachers that are going to come up with those solutions, especially with physical educators. I think that's the key. Literacy is easily done in a gym. Now in a classroom it can become a bit hectic. And I'm not going to lie, teachers, we tend to like to control things. And depending on the age group, more issues with control. So in a chaotic environment, some people don't feel comfortable with that. And that's what it becomes a bit. It becomes organized chaos within a gym. So if you're doing a literacy unit and you're doing it with animals, so animals that can fly, but the kids need to go to different signs. So we'd have different signs on the boards, and you'd have an ostrich, and then an eagle, and you'd have the kid that would run to the ostrich. Ostrich can fly, no they can't, find another one, so they could be running different locations. So it is feasible to be active. Now in terms of grand projects like Harry Potter Week, Harry Potter Week wasn't necessarily done just for physical literacy. It was done for literacy and numeracy mostly. But we played Quidditch, which was a lot of fun. Seeing kids running around with brooms in between their legs, throwing balls, it was awesome. The cheering was really cool too. But there's other ways you can do that. Like the Olympics is a prime time to be able to do something like that, where you can take social studies, you can take business, take a look at the business of the Olympics. FIFA, we have the World Cup here right now. The last month should have been World Cup fever in every school. And we could have done different games with that, so.
Thank you. Awesome. Catch.
Do I speak to the X? Right into the big button. Armand, thank you for your presentation. I just have a question about any recommendations you have about involving staff. Because we found that, and at least in our school system, that the kids are keen, they're looking for activities, and there's facilitators, but you need to have commitment from the actual school structure. Yeah. How do you find that?
Yeah, you just touched the button right there. You got to find that one person, that one champion in that staff that will step up to the plate. And oftentimes once one steps up, there's a few more that'll step up to it. It's to find that win-win. And where are you from? Which school or which province? From Halifax? Okay. It's to find that win-win with the staff. So to me, this year we had the Iron Will training group in the schools. We had a lot of staff participate in the training group. So we did all sorts of things. And most of it was interval training with the staff, and they had goals in mind. So oftentimes the goals that I see the staff wanting to do is aerobic base. So it would be a 5K race or a 10K race or so on and so forth. To link it up with some type of fundraiser or some type of challenge with the kids would probably be a way to go. Most staff are pretty proud. They don't want to lose. Most people don't want to lose. So that would be one way to go, is to challenge. Maybe challenge staff per staff instead of staff to kids. Oftentimes the staff to kids ratio doesn't work out, and once it gets counted out. So have a staff to staff challenge. So from school to school, that would be a possibility. And the technology is there now that you can track the other people, you can see what they're doing. It's the accountability factor in that situation, right? And for school teachers, the major problem always is time. So it's how do you find time for them to take part in it. There's all sorts of ways you can do that. Now, the first thing is you got to go through the union and so on and so forth. So it's not easy. I'm well aware of your situation, and we've been fighting it in our province as well. But my suggestion would be to number one, challenge them. Number two, linking up to something that they care about. Our staff, we've had a lot of cancer issues in our staff, and in particular staff members that have lost people through cancer. So having a cancer fundraiser run for a 5K got everybody sort of moving in that situation. But that would be mine. It was find the win-win for the staff, and oftentimes it's just listening to them and finding out where they want to go. And the biggest thing they usually have is they're scared. They haven't done anything. So it's bringing in that professional physiotherapist that can make it easier for them. And and that brings me into that aging question that we had in socialization. It seems to be the real link to keep people active is the socialization part. So after, I think it's the age of 65 or 70, whatever the presentation said, socialization tends to be a really important factor, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of well-advertised or well-marketed situations. So like the walkers in the mall, they do a lot of that. Well, not everybody knows about that, and that's a way to get them active. So I think to answer your question, it's number one, to challenge them. If you can find a win-win solution, and then to take away that fear. And by taking away that fear, take away the excuses. And the can't goes out the window as long as they have that. Does that make sense?
I'm going to throw this ball at Dr. Tricia Parsons. Yeah, because I want her to tell Armand about what the desk at work looks like.
So I believe Diana's referring to my tread desk, which is what you're talking about, yeah.
Okay. So you're staying active with the treadmill desk?
Yeah, with the treadmill desk.
Yeah.
Basically because I've come to the conclusion that CIHR does not care if I am healthy. They only care if I am working hard and getting my papers out. So in any event, I have my hamster wheel, and it works for me.
You know, that's an interesting fact. I know that there's somebody in our province that works on, I think they're called smart pods. And Leon and I have worked on different things, and it's these active desks to make sure that you're, so it's interesting for that. We use the balls, the Swiss balls, so we sit on those. The only problem with the Swiss balls with kids is they tend to fall over. You have some that like to fall over, so it becomes an issue.
They put treadmill desks in all the schools in a couple of areas in the States. And the kids' productivity went up, their sleep habits were better, all of their grades were better, concentration was better. Use of Ritalin and diagnosis of ADD, ADHD went down substantially. They said, great, this works, and they took them all out of the schools after the study was over. None of the schools have it.
We're doing spark bikes now
Okay.
in this region. Yeah.
Wait.
Luke McDonald from Aerobics First Year has put the first bike into some of the schools here. Now we have, I think, lots of schools with bikes in, and they're just a bike at the back of the room, and the kids log on, and if they're feeling restless, they just can pedal, and they're very quiet so that nobody, they don't disrupt the school, and they don't disrupt the lesson, and they learn, and apparently the productivity is going on.
Luke and I have been discussing, or we've sent messages back and forth about the spark bikes. The major issue with the spark bikes ends up being the cost, right? So it's about how do you fundraise in that situation and creating that win-win. Yeah, so that's one way. And how do you get them into the schools? But it's all about self-monitoring, which is great. It's a great way for kids to stay active. They tend to sell it with the ADHD crowd. So if you're getting restless, you go on, you come back. So self-monitoring, mental fitness, it's pretty good. Yes?
So I actually used to work in schools, and one of my biggest barriers was what I would call the S word, the safety word. So I would find administrators, that was my biggest barrier. They would say, well, that's not safe. It's things like play structures, right? The kids couldn't have access to them daily because it's not safe to have more than one classroom at a play structure at a time.
Yeah.
So they were getting to it maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. So how do you overcome those barriers? I mean, I started sending out like this lovely article that, you know, talks about the risks and benefits, but that's not enough.
Yeah.
So.
The pendulum shifted so far to the left where we're bubble wrapping our kids. So I understand the frustration. I truly understand the frustration. And we're at that shift now where with the pendulum going all the way to the left and bubble wrapping, we're creating a generation that are afraid to fail, number one. Oftentimes you'll see parents walking around behind the child making sure they don't fall. Well, falling teaches you how to get back up. So there's a lot of aspects to that. And the safety word is definitely one that's linked closely to insurance issues. And gently The US sort of mentality of suing at every chance has creeped into Canada, and it's caused a lot of issues on numerous fronts, and physical activity is one of them. Teacher support's another one. So we've gone from parents supporting the teachers to that's not often the case, or not always the case in this scenario. So when it comes to safety word, my suggestion on that would be to, well, there's a few ways you can find. One, you got to find a way to appease the administrator, either with a win-win solution. So what would be your best case scenario? And get them talking. And then from there, trying to find out, okay, well, what can we do in this situation? So is it rotating one class in for 15 minutes? At least it's 15 minutes, and then keep on rotating them so everybody gets in. Is it a money issue? So do we need more money to go get more playground facilities or whatever we do need? I wouldn't have stopped to the safety part. To me, I would have figured out another way. So is it moving the desk out of the room? One of the things that we did in our classroom was I took away all the single desk, I put 3 tables, and then I put communication areas around the room. So they're basically like dinettes against the room. So then it takes away the middle, so the middle's open, so it's more active to be able to do some of the stuff. But that's rethinking the whole way that we do a classroom. So from 24 to 30 desks, single desks, to no desks, and having the people on the outsides working in groups of 2 or 3, and then having that play, or that, not play area, but that area in the middle to be open to be able to do theater, dance, whatever which way they want to interpret it. So I understand the safety issue, because there are some logistical issues when you have 600 kids in a room, or 800 kids in a school, or 1,000, that you need to go around that. And I think that answers your question on how you get them active. Well, there's ways you can do that. Everybody can be in the playground in the morning with somebody on top of the stage doing Pilates, or whatever which way it is. But yeah, it is an issue, and it's something that you need to take account of when you're going in to present something. Yeah.
I've got the mic right now, so thank you for your presentation. It was great. A question for you is, how long have you had these strategies in place at your school, and have you seen any change in the sedentary lifestyle associated with the use of cell phones by kids?
Oh, that's a good one. Cell phones at our school outside of the classroom is allowed. Inside of the classroom, it's not, depending on the teacher. So if the teacher has access, if he wants to use the technology, and then he's fine too. So I actually don't see the cell phone as the major inhibitor in middle school. It might be in high school, but I don't see it in middle school, and they tend to not. It's about 10 to 15% that have them in elementary, contrary to popular belief. Apart from major centers. Major centers, the numbers are different. The strategies that we've incorporated, we've had for the last year. So after Iron Will, we decided, after talking with some of the donors or some of the sponsors of the programs, we realized that it needs to be in the schools. So it needs to be school-driven, student-driven. And that's when we came back and we asked them what they wanted to see in the school. So the first question was to sit down with the students and say, okay, well, what don't you have that you would like to? And one of them was that they wanted to set a goal to do a race and fundraise. So that was an easy one to do, and we had a lot of kids participate in that one. It was highly successful. The other one was they wanted to do dance. So we got an after-school dance program. That one wasn't as successful as people would believe, and mostly due to, I think, the timing and busing issues. So when it comes to the area, the kids that wanted to stay usually had drives or stayed close to the school, and the other kids couldn't. So we had about 50 or 60 people register to be able to participate, which is about 10% of the school. But the issue was that there was only between 9 to 15 that would show up. Now, still successful, there's 9 or 15 people that are still. The other one was yoga. Yoga tend to be really good numbers. We tend to have anywhere between 30 to 45. And to tell you the truth, I'm not sure why. We haven't really gone through it in that aspect. Changes that we've made inside of the school, so inside of the classroom itself, we incorporated a different warm-up routine. So every day we would warm up in a different way, incorporating some physical literacy, incorporating some cardiovascular work, incorporating some strength training. So we did some Tabata, we did some stations. We did some cards. We did all sorts of different warm-ups, and depending on the warm-ups, we would see better results. And then we had them tracking their own fitness routine, so they had their own health report cards, because health report cards aren't part of the curriculum anymore. So they were tracking their own health, and that worked really well till Christmas. And then at Christmas time, when we came back, Harry Potter week happened, and then we had numerous snowstorms, and then it sort of fell off the wayside. So on a full year, I think if we track it properly and we do it properly throughout the year, I think the numbers would be quite high, because by Christmas time, about 85%, if my numbers are right, 85% had kept or improved their health by the numbers that we were looking at. So the 10-minute run, push-ups, sit-ups, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So, we'll talk about what we think about the guest speaker in a minute. What do you think of the catch mic? I think you like it until I throw it at you. I just want to say thank you very much to Armand to come in his very, very busy time and leave his dogs with nothing to eat. And just talk about maybe the 3 messages he was trying to throw home. Correct me if I'm wrong. Networking. So he would suggest to us that we go out into the schools and say, what can I do to help? Networking. 2 is prevention through innovation, that innovation's the key, and that brings in things like STEM. And I hadn't heard of sci, engineering, tech, and math as STEM. So I think we should go up and look at that and see how we can help with that, because that sounds very interesting. And the 3rd one was get involved. So please think about your local schools and see what we can do, and maybe together, through networking across the nation, we can see if something's working for one of us somewhere. We could maybe see if it can catch on and be wildfire. So thank you very, very much for coming. I'd like to give you a little gift from the CPA.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, it's light.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that's the end of our very first mini symposium with a theme. So send us your LinkedIn, your tweets, your Twitters, everything to say, did you like it? And what theme would you like to see next year if we're going to do it again to lead on into Congress? We'll be back here to begin the Enid Graham and some opening ceremonies. Thank you very, very much for coming. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And don't get yourself